Sarah was a woman of quiet strength and determination. Every day she woke up early, her mind already racing with thoughts of what she needed to do. She had a lot on her plate. She wasn't just a waitress, she was a single mother. And her daughter Mia was everything to her. Sarah had become very familiar with the demands of her job, but nothing compared to the responsibility of raising Mia alone. Sarah worked at a popular restaurant in the heart of the city. It wasn't the most glamorous job, but it paid the bills. She had been working there for nearly 3 years now. The restaurant was always busy, especially during weekends. The long hours, the constant movement between the kitchen and the tables, and the tired feet. Sarah had grown used to it all. She knew what was expected of her: to serve customers with a smile, to keep things running smoothly, and to make sure the guests were happy. But for Sarah, the job wasn't just about serving food and taking orders. It was about survival. She had no family to turn to, no one who could help her with Mia. Her mother had passed away a few years ago, and her father had never been in the picture. It was just Sarah and Mia against the world. Sarah's apartment was small, tucked away on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't much, but it was home. She would spend her evenings cooking dinner for Mia, helping her with homework, and tucking her into bed. After Mia was asleep, Sarah would often sit in the quiet apartment, her thoughts racing with worries about money, bills, and the future. But no matter how tough things got, she refused to show her daughter any weakness. Sarah's goal was simple: to give Mia a better life than the one she had. In the restaurant, Sarah was known for her hardworking nature. Her co-workers admired her ability to keep going, no matter how tired she was. She would work double shifts if needed, never complaining, always pushing herself. Even when the restaurant was at its busiest, with orders piling up and customers getting impatient, Sarah stayed calm. She knew that losing her cool would only make things worse. Her regular customers loved her. She knew the names of almost every person who came through the door. She had a way of making people feel comfortable, as if they were not just customers but guests in her home. There was one elderly couple who came in every Thursday for dinner. They always sat at the same table by the window. Sarah would chat with them while taking their orders, and they would tell her stories about their youth. She made them laugh, and they made her feel like part of their family. But Sarah had her struggles too. Being a single mother wasn't easy, especially when she had to balance work and motherhood. Sometimes she would miss out on sleep to take care of Mia, and other times she had to turn down social invitations because she couldn't afford the time. Most of her friends had families of their own or were busy with their own lives. Sarah, on the other hand, was constantly on the move, always juggling work, her daughter, and her hopes for a better future. There were days when Sarah felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. She would find herself staring at the clock, counting down the minutes until her shift ended. But even when she felt exhausted, she couldn't afford to show it. Her daughter, Mia, was counting on her, and Sarah refused to let her down. Mia was 5 years old, and her bright eyes and curious nature always made Sarah smile. Mia loved to ask questions about everything: why the sky was blue, where rain came from, and why people ate different foods. Sarah would answer her questions as best as she could, using whatever little knowledge she had. They spent their evenings together, reading stories or playing with toys. Sarah cherished these moments, knowing that they were the only true moments of peace in her busy life. There was a small park near their apartment, and on weekends, Sarah would take Mia there to play. Mia loved the swings, and Sarah would push her gently, watching her daughter's face light up with joy. Sarah, though tired, found comfort in these simple moments. They didn't have much, but they had each other. Sarah's dream was simple: to create a better life for Mia. She didn't need riches or fame, but she wanted Mia to grow up with opportunities she never had. She wanted Mia to know that hard work and determination could lead to a better life, no matter where you came from. Sarah was determined to make that dream a reality. But despite all of Sarah's hard work, life wasn't always kind. The restaurant business, like many others, had its ups and downs. On slow days, Sarah barely made enough to cover her transportation costs. And while she worked hard, she didn't always get the recognition she deserved. She would stay late, cleaning up after everyone else, always making sure everything was perfect, but sometimes it felt like no one noticed. It was discouraging, but Sarah never gave up. She knew she had to keep going. One thing Sarah always believed in was that hard work would eventually pay off. She may not have seen the results immediately, but she trusted that every shift, every smile, and every extra effort would eventually lead to something better. As Sarah walked to work that morning, carrying her small, worn-out bag, she had no idea that today would be different. She had no idea that her life was about to change in a way she couldn't imagine. But for now, Sarah focused on the task ahead, serving the customers, taking care of Mia, and doing her best, just as she always had. It was an ordinary Tuesday afternoon when Sarah first noticed the man sitting in the corner booth by the window. He looked different from the usual crowd. His expensive suit, neatly pressed shirt, and expensive shoes set him apart from the regular patrons who came to the restaurant. But what really caught her attention wasn't just his appearance. It was the way he carried himself. He sat with a calm confidence, almost as though he didn't belong in a busy restaurant like hers, a place full of noise and chatter. He looked more like the type of man who would sit in an office high above the city, not in a humble corner booth at a local diner. Sarah didn't think too much about him at first. Her job was busy as usual. She was rushing from table to table, delivering food, taking orders, and checking in with customers. The restaurant was full, and there were a few regulars she needed to attend to. She smiled and greeted the customers, making sure everyone was happy with their meals. But every so often, her eyes would drift back to the man in the corner. There was something about him that seemed different, though she couldn't quite put her finger on it. As the hours passed, Sarah found herself refilling his coffee cup several times. He didn't order much, just a simple meal of a sandwich and soup, but he watched her closely each time she approached the table. Not in a strange way, but with genuine interest. She couldn't help but feel a little nervous. Being noticed by someone who looked like he could be a businessman, maybe even a CEO, made her a little uneasy. She wasn't used to being noticed like that, especially not by people who seemed out of her league. "Everything okay with your meal, sir?" Sarah asked, offering a warm smile as she placed the coffee pot down. The man looked up at her and nodded. "Yes, thank you." "Everything's great," he said, his voice calm and measured. "You're doing a great job." Sarah blinked, taken off guard by the compliment. It wasn't often that she got such feedback, especially not from someone like him. "Thank you, sir. I appreciate it." He smiled slightly, his eyes following her as she walked away. Sarah could feel his gaze on her, but she quickly focused on her other tables, trying to push the thought out of her mind. She couldn't afford to get distracted, not when she had so much work to do. As the evening wore on, the restaurant grew busier, and Sarah found herself running back and forth between the kitchen and her tables. But despite the rush, she couldn't help but notice the man in the corner again. He was still there, working on his laptop now, his attention on the screen but still aware of his surroundings. Sarah couldn't help but feel that he was observing everything, almost as if he were taking note of how the restaurant operated, how the staff worked together. It wasn't until later in the evening, just before her shift was about to end, that Sarah had another interaction with him. She had just delivered an order to another table when she noticed he had finished his meal. He had been sitting there for over 2 hours now, and it seemed like he was getting ready to leave. Sarah felt a bit of relief. Maybe she wouldn't have to worry about him anymore tonight. But as she walked past his table on her way to the back, the man called out to her. "Excuse me, miss," he said, his voice firm but kind. Sarah turned, feeling her heart skip a beat. She hadn't expected to be called over again. She walked back to his table, hoping that she wasn't making a mistake by taking too much time. "Yes, sir?" He looked up at her with a thoughtful expression, then placed his phone down on the table. "I've been watching you all evening. You work very hard." I can tell you care about your job, but I can also see that you're tired. How long have you been working today?" Sarah was a little surprised by his question. She had been so focused on her work that she hadn't even realized how exhausted she felt. "I've been here for about 8 hours now," she said, shrugging slightly. "It's been a busy day." He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I can tell. You're one of the best waitresses I've seen in a while. It's clear you give your best, no matter what, but I know it's not easy. You're doing more than just a job. You're trying to make a living for your family, aren't you?" Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. It wasn't often that anyone truly understood her struggle. Most people saw her just as a waitress, but this man seemed to see more. "Yes," she said quietly. "I'm a single mom. I have a little girl at home, and I'm doing my best to make sure she has a good life." His eyes softened, and for a moment, Sarah could have sworn she saw a flicker of empathy in his gaze. "I understand," he said gently. "You're doing great. But I think you deserve a bit more than this, don't you? You're working so hard, and it seems like you're always running on empty." Sarah wasn't sure what to say. She had always known that her life was hard, but hearing it from someone else made it seem even more real. It was as if her struggles had been noticed by someone who could truly make a difference. But she didn't know how to respond. "I'm just doing what I have to do," she said with a small, tired smile. "I have no choice." The man nodded, looking down at his phone for a moment. Then he looked back up at her, his expression serious. "I'm James Anderson," he said. "I own a few businesses in the city. I've been watching you work tonight, and I have to say your dedication is impressive. I'd like to offer you something. Maybe it's time you had a chance to rest, to stop working so hard for so little. I'd like to help you out." Sarah blinked in surprise. She had no idea what he was talking about. Was he offering her money? A job she couldn't quite understand. I'm not sure what you mean, sir," she stammered. James smiled gently. "I'll explain more soon, but I think you deserve something better than this." He stood up, placing his credit card on the table. "For now, please keep your head up. I'll be in touch." With that, he walked out of the restaurant, leaving Sarah standing there, more confused than ever. The next few days after James's unexpected visit felt like a blur for Sarah. She had tried to put the encounter out of her mind, but the memory of his words kept coming back to her. "You deserve something better than this." What did he mean by that? Was he just being kind? Or was there something more behind his offer? As busy as the restaurant was, Sarah had little time to dwell on it. She was used to long shifts and rushing around, taking orders, delivering food, and checking on customers. But despite the usual routine, something felt different that day. She had a nagging feeling, something just off in the air. Maybe it was the exhaustion catching up to her, or maybe it was the weight of trying to balance everything in her life. But today, Sarah was finding it harder to keep up with everything. Mia's daycare had called that morning to let Sarah know that they had a sudden staff shortage. Normally, Sarah would have relied on her sister for help, but she had moved out of state a few months ago, leaving Sarah with few options. With no one else to turn to, Sarah made the difficult decision to bring Mia to work with her. It wasn't ideal, but she didn't have a choice. Mia was a sweet girl, full of energy and curiosity. She had a smile that could light up a room, and Sarah loved spending time with her. But she also knew that Mia could be a handful, especially when she wasn't in the mood to stay still. Sarah had packed her favorite toys and snacks, hoping to keep her entertained while she worked. She set up a little space in the corner of the staff room for Mia's stroller and a blanket, hoping no one would notice. The restaurant was packed with customers, as usual. The lunch rush was always chaotic, and Sarah had grown accustomed to the loud noises and fast-paced environment. She was in the middle of delivering an order to a table when she heard her manager, Tom, call her name. "Sarah," he barked from the kitchen. "Come here." Sarah immediately felt a cold rush of nerves. She hadn't done anything wrong. She was just trying to make the best of a tough situation. But she could tell from Tom's tone that something wasn't right. She quickly finished with her customers and made her way to the kitchen. Tom was standing near the back door, his arms crossed and a frown on his face. "What's going on with your daughter in the staff room?" he asked, his voice tight. Sarah's heart sank. She hadn't expected anyone to notice. She had kept Mia quiet and tucked away, hoping no one would cause a fuss. But now it seemed like her worst fear had come true. "I'm sorry, Tom," Sarah said quickly, her hands wringing together. "I had no other choice. The daycare called in sick, and I didn't have a sitter. She's quiet, and I'll keep an eye on her. It's just for today." Tom shook his head, looking frustrated. "That's not how this works, Sarah. We have a policy here. No kids allowed in the restaurant. It's not safe, and it's not professional." Sarah felt a wave of embarrassment wash over her. She had been trying so hard to balance everything, but now it felt like her world was crumbling. "I understand," she said quietly, trying to keep her voice steady. "But I really don't have any other option." Tom's eyes narrowed. "Well, that's not my problem. You need to make other arrangements, or you can't work here anymore." The words hit Sarah like a punch to the stomach. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her job, the one thing that had been her lifeline, her only source of income, was on the line because of a situation that was out of her control. "I can't just leave," Sarah said, her voice trembling now. "I need this job. I have a child to take care of. I've been working here for 3 years. Please just give me a chance to finish my shift." But Tom wasn't listening. He shook his head again and stepped toward the back door. "I'm sorry, Sarah, but the rules are the rules. If you can't follow them, I have no choice." Before Sarah could respond, Tom turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving her standing there, shocked and speechless. She felt her heart drop into her stomach. What was she supposed to do now? She had always worked hard, and she had never asked for special treatment. But now, it felt like all her efforts were for nothing. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She needed to finish the shift. She needed the money. But with the tension between her and Tom, it felt impossible to focus. She felt a sense of panic rising inside her, wondering how she could fix the mess she had gotten into. She walked back into the dining area, her mind racing. She could see her fellow servers going about their work, oblivious to the conversation that had just taken place. Sarah glanced at the corner where Mia was sleeping in her stroller, her tiny hands curled into fists. She couldn't let this job slip away. It was everything to her. But what was she supposed to do now? That's when it happened. As Sarah was walking past a table near the entrance, she overheard a conversation. 2 men were talking quietly, but their words were loud enough for Sarah to hear. "Did you see that waitress? She's bringing her kid to work. I don't think it's professional. She should be fired." The words cut through Sarah like a knife. She knew people would talk. She had always heard whispers about her being a single mother, about how hard it must be for her. But this felt different. It felt like an attack. Her hands shook as she moved away, trying to hold back the tears that were threatening to spill. She couldn't cry, not here, not now, not in front of the customers. But the hurt was deep, and it was real. She didn't want to be judged for doing what she had to do. She was doing her best. Suddenly, the door opened, and Sarah froze. It was the last person she expected to see, the man from the corner booth. James Anderson, the CEO. He had returned to the restaurant for an unplanned visit, and he had seen everything unfold. Sarah's heart raced as he walked toward her, his eyes scanning her face. He could tell something was wrong, and he didn't need to ask. He already knew. As the restaurant buzzed with the sounds of clinking silverware and quiet conversations, Sarah stood frozen at the edge of the dining room. Her heart was pounding in her chest, and a mix of exhaustion and frustration made her feel like the walls were closing in. She was trying to keep it together, but inside, she was falling apart. She didn't know how long she stood there, staring at the floor, her mind racing with the harsh words from her manager and the judgmental stares from the customers. Her thoughts kept circling back to Mia, asleep in the stroller just a few feet away. What was she supposed to do now? The thought of losing this job, the one steady thing in her life, was almost too much to bear. She had worked so hard, day after day, and yet it felt like everything was slipping through her fingers. "Are you okay?" Sarah's head snapped up at the sound of the voice. It was James Anderson, the CEO. She hadn't seen him approach. But there he was, standing in front of her with a concerned expression on his face. He looked different today, more serious, his dark eyes studying her in a way that made her feel like she was the only person in the room. I'm fine," Sarah said, quickly wiping away a stray tear that she hadn't even realized had fallen. She took a deep breath, trying to pull herself together. I don't know what to do." James didn't respond immediately. He simply nodded, taking in her words. There was no rush, no attempt to move things along. It was clear that he wasn't interested in small talk. He wanted to understand what was happening. "I saw what happened," he said quietly. "I overheard the conversation with your manager." Sarah's stomach twisted at the mention of it. She had known it was inevitable, that sooner or later, someone would find out. But hearing it out loud made it feel even more real. She glanced around nervously, half expecting to see someone else listening in. But it seemed like the restaurant had settled back into its normal rhythm. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't have a choice. Mia's daycare called in sick, and I couldn't find anyone to help, so I brought her here. I thought I could manage, but I guess I was wrong." James's eyes softened, and he stepped a little closer, his tone gentle. "You're doing the best you can. I can see that. But what happened today? It shouldn't have happened." Sarah was surprised by his words. She had expected to be scolded, maybe even told to pack her things and leave. After all, that was the reality of the world she lived in, a world where one mistake could cost you everything. But James wasn't acting that way. Instead, he was listening. He wasn't looking at her like she was a problem, but as if he understood the weight of her situation. "You shouldn't have to choose between your job and your child," he continued. "That's not right." Sarah swallowed hard, her chest tightening. The truth of his words hit her like a wave. She had always known it, deep down. But hearing it from someone who had the power to make a difference made it feel more real, more urgent. She had been caught in the middle of a system that didn't seem to care about the struggles of working parents. The rules were the rules, and there was no room for exceptions. No room for the unexpected, no room for life to happen. "I can't lose this job," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "I need this job to take care of Mia. It's the only thing I have. If I get fired, I don't know what I'll do." James was silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on her. There was a pause, as if he were weighing his words carefully. Finally he spoke again, his voice calm but firm. "You won't lose your job," he said. "Not because of this. Not if I have anything to say about it." Sarah blinked, confused. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. She had never expected someone like James Anderson to care about her, let alone step in to help. He was a CEO, a man with millions of dollars and a world of influence. What could he possibly want with a waitress like her? But the rules. Sarah started to protest, but James interrupted her gently. "The rules are important. I get it. But rules should help, not hurt. And right now, these rules are doing more harm than good. This isn't about policy, it's about people. And sometimes people need a little flexibility." He looked at her with a steady gaze, his expression serious. "I'll talk to your manager. This situation shouldn't have happened, and it won't again. You deserve to be treated better than this." Sarah didn't know what to say. She had never expected anyone to stand up for her like this. She had always been the one who had to fight for herself, always the one left to deal with the consequences of every decision. But now, here was this man, someone who could easily ignore her problems, choosing to help her instead. "I don't know how to thank you," Sarah said softly, her voice filled with gratitude. "You don't have to," James replied with a small smile. "It's the right thing to do." You're a hard worker, Sarah. You deserve to have a job that doesn't to put you in a position where you have to choose between work and family." Sarah nodded slowly, still processing his words. She felt a weight lift off her shoulders, but a part of her still couldn't believe that someone like James was on her side. She had always assumed that the rich and powerful were out of touch with the struggles of people like her. But here was proof that not all of them were. "Thank you," she said again, her voice barely above a whisper. James gave her a reassuring smile. "Don't worry about it. You've got enough on your plate. I'll take care of this. Just focus on your work and your daughter." As James turned to leave, Sarah watched him walk away, her mind racing. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe things were about to change for the better. The next day, Sarah came into work with a nervous energy she couldn't shake. The events of the previous day were still fresh in her mind. James Anderson had promised to help her, but she wasn't sure what to expect. Was it all just empty words, or would he really step in and make a difference? She had worked in the restaurant for years, and no one had ever done anything to stand up for her like James had. It felt almost too good to be true. As she walked into the staff room to change into her uniform, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a message from Tom, her manager. "Meet me in the office when you arrive." Her stomach tightened. She had no idea what this was about, but it couldn't be good. The last time she had been summoned to the office, it was to discuss the situation with Mia. She wasn't sure if she could handle another confrontation. But James had said he would talk to Tom, so maybe this was something different. With a deep breath, Sarah made her way to the office. As she knocked on the door and stepped inside, Tom was sitting behind his desk, his usual stern expression on his face. But today, there was something different in his demeanor. He wasn't as tense, and there was a slight shift in his posture. Sarah couldn't tell if it was because of the conversation with James or something else. "Sarah, come in," Tom said, his voice softer than usual. "Have a seat." Sarah hesitated for a moment before sitting down in the chair across from him. She felt like she was about to be reprimanded again, but she had to remind herself that things had changed since yesterday. James had made his promise, and she couldn't let fear rule her now. Tom cleared his throat and folded his hands on the desk. "I had a conversation with Mr. Anderson yesterday evening," he said, his tone a little more careful than usual. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She had no idea that Tom had actually spoken to James. She had assumed that James would handle things quietly out of sight. But clearly, he hadn't been afraid to make his voice heard. "Mr. Anderson expressed some concerns about how things were handled with you yesterday," Tom continued. "He made it clear that he didn't think it was fair to treat you the way you were treated, especially given your situation. And after thinking about it, I have to agree with him." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She wasn't sure if she was hearing this right. Had Tom just agreed with James? Had he changed his mind? Tom leaned forward, his gaze steady. "I've been managing this restaurant for years, and I've always followed the rules without questioning them. But maybe I've been too rigid. Maybe we can be a little more understanding, especially when it comes to the needs of our staff. We all have lives outside of work, and sometimes things don't go as planned." "I understand that now." Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her. It was as if a heavy weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She had always known that the rules could be too harsh, but she had never imagined anyone would challenge them. "I want to apologize," Tom said, his voice sincere. "What happened yesterday was wrong, and I should have handled it better. I'm sorry for the stress it caused you." Sarah was stunned. She had never expected to hear those words from Tom. He wasn't the type of manager who apologized often, if ever, but here he was, admitting that he had made a mistake. "Thank you," Sarah said quietly, her voice filled with gratitude. "I appreciate it. I just wanted to do my job and take care of my daughter. I didn't mean for things to get so complicated." "I know," Tom replied, nodding. "And moving forward, I want to make sure this doesn't happen again." From now on, we'll be more flexible when it comes to staff with family emergencies. You don't have to choose between your job and your child. If something comes up again, just let me know and we'll work it out." Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. She wasn't used to hearing these words from anyone, especially not from Tom. It felt like a dream that she didn't want to wake up from. "Thank you," she said again, her voice thick with emotion. "I didn't know what I was going to do if I lost this job, but now it feels like I have a chance." Tom smiled, his expression softer than usual. "I'm glad we could work this out. You're a valuable part of this team, Sarah, and I don't want you to feel like you're ever alone in this." As Sarah left the office, she felt lighter, as if a huge burden had been lifted from her chest. She couldn't believe what had just happened. Not only had James stepped in to help her, but he had somehow changed the entire dynamic at the restaurant. Things were starting to look up, and for the first time in a long while, Sarah felt a sense of hope she hadn't known in years. But the surprises weren't over yet. Later that afternoon, as Sarah was finishing up a table's order, one of the servers walked over with an envelope in her hand. "This came for you," the server said, handing it to her with a curious glance. Sarah took the envelope, her heart skipping a beat as she saw the return address. It was from James Anderson. What could he want now? She carefully opened the envelope, her hands trembling. Inside was a letter on official-looking stationery. But it wasn't just any letter. It was a formal offer. The letter read, "Dear Sarah, after careful consideration, I would like to extend an offer for you to become a manager at the restaurant. I've seen firsthand the dedication and hard work you bring every day, and I believe you deserve the opportunity to take on more responsibility and advance in your career. The new position will come with a raise, more flexible hours, and the chance to grow professionally. I look forward to working with you more closely. Sincerely, James Anderson." Sarah stared at the letter, her mind racing. Was this real? Had James just offered her a promotion? It was more than she could have ever imagined. She felt a wave of gratitude and disbelief. In one unexpected moment, her world had shifted. Sarah was no longer just the hardworking waitress trying to make ends meet. She was someone who had been seen, valued, and given a chance to build a future. The days following Sarah's promotion were a whirlwind of excitement and change. At first, she wasn't sure she was ready for the new responsibilities. She had spent most of her adult life working hard to get by, always focusing on making ends meet for her daughter, Mia. The idea of stepping into a leadership role felt like a dream. But as the days passed, she realized that this opportunity wasn't just about her. It was about giving Mia a better future and proving to herself that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. When Sarah walked into the restaurant each day, she felt different. The atmosphere had changed, and so had the way her colleagues treated her. No longer was she just one of the waitresses hustling through the lunch rush. Now she had a voice. She was the one who helped solve problems, guided the team, and made sure everything ran smoothly. But she didn't let it go to her head. Sarah remained humble, knowing that her promotion was a gift and opportunity she would never take for granted. Her fellow employees noticed the change, too. They respected Sarah even more now that she was in a position of authority. They saw how hard she worked, how she always went the extra mile, and how she made sure everyone was supported. She wasn't the type of manager to bark orders from the back office. Instead, Sarah worked side by side with her team, helping where needed and leading by example. One of the biggest changes Sarah noticed was how much her life at home had improved. The new position came with more flexible hours, which meant she no longer had to scramble for childcare or miss out on important moments with Mia. There was a sense of peace that Sarah hadn't felt in years. She could take Mia to the park after work, attend her school events, and still have the time and energy to make dinner for the two of them. It was a balance she had never thought possible. One evening, as Sarah finished her shift and walked out into the cool night air, she saw Mia waiting for her outside the restaurant. Her little girl was standing near the entrance, holding her favorite stuffed bunny and looking up at the sky. Sarah smiled as she approached. "Mama," Mia called, running over to her with open arms. Sarah bent down and scooped her up, feeling the familiar warmth of her daughter's embrace. "How was your day, sweetie?" she asked, kissing Mia on the cheek. "It was good, Mama. Mrs. Wilson read us a story about a lion who didn't want to be king, but then he became the best king ever." Sarah laughed, ruffling Mia's hair. "I'm glad you liked it. What else did you do?" "We played outside, and I made a new friend named Emma. She said she's going to invite me to her birthday party." Sarah's heart swelled with pride. She had been so focused on providing for Mia, but now she was seeing how her daughter was growing and making her own memories. She realized that the little things mattered, like spending quality time together and letting Mia build friendships. As they walked home, hand in hand, Sarah couldn't help but think back to the days when she felt overwhelmed and alone. Back when she struggled to make ends meet and worried about the future. It seemed like a lifetime ago, yet it had only been a few months. The changes that had come into her life were nothing short of a miracle, and she felt incredibly grateful. The next day at work, Sarah noticed a shift in the restaurant. It was subtle at first, but it was there. Her coworkers seemed to be more willing to speak up, to share ideas, and to work together as a team. They were motivated, knowing that their voices would be heard. And that was something Sarah was determined to foster, an environment where everyone felt valued and respected. One afternoon, as Sarah was organizing the staff schedule, one of the waiters, Mark, pulled her aside. "Hey, Sarah," he said, looking a little nervous. "I just wanted to say thanks. You've really changed things around here. It feels different now. I mean, when Tom was in charge, it always felt like we were just working to get by, but you've made it feel like we're actually part of something. You listen to us, and you care." Sarah was taken aback by his words. She hadn't realized how much her efforts were being noticed. "Thanks, Mark," she said, smiling warmly. "I really appreciate you saying that. We're all a team here, and I want everyone to feel like they matter. You're all a big part of what makes this place great." Mark grinned. "It's true. I've been here for a while, and I've never felt like this before. You're doing something right." Later that week, Sarah was asked to give a presentation at a staff meeting. It was a chance for her to share her vision for the restaurant and how she planned to continue making improvements. As she stood in front of the group, Sarah felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. She had always been a worker, not a speaker, but this was her chance to show her team how much they meant to her. "I know things haven't always been perfect here," Sarah began, her voice steady but filled with sincerity. "But I want you all to know that I am committed to making this a place where we support each other, where we all have a voice, and where we can grow together. We're a family, and families take care of each other." The room was quiet for a moment, and then a few of her colleagues nodded in agreement. Sarah could feel the energy in the room shift, as if everyone was on the same page. They were ready for change, and Sarah was ready to lead them toward a better future. As she walked out of the meeting room, she couldn't help but feel proud of what they had accomplished together. The restaurant was already running more smoothly than ever before, and there was a sense of camaraderie among the team that hadn't existed before. It wasn't just about the food or the service anymore. It was about creating a workplace where everyone felt valued and appreciated. Back at home that evening, Sarah sat down at the kitchen table with Mia, enjoying a quiet dinner together. It had been a long day, but it felt like everything was falling into place. She was finally able to focus on the things that mattered most: her family, her career, and her future. And as she looked at Mia, who was happily coloring a picture of a rainbow, Sarah knew that all the hard work, the sleepless nights, and the struggles had been worth it. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was on the right path. Things weren't perfect, but they were getting better every day. And that was enough for now. As the weeks passed, Sarah's life continued to change in ways she never thought possible. What had started as a simple offer of help from a stranger, James Anderson, the CEO, had snowballed into a series of events that reshaped not only her career, but also her sense of self-worth. She was no longer just a waitress trying to make ends meet. She was a manager, a leader, and most importantly, a mother who could finally provide a stable future for her daughter. But the journey hadn't been without its challenges. As Sarah stepped into her new role, she faced moments of doubt. Could she really balance everything? Was she truly capable of leading a team, especially when it felt like the weight of responsibility was always on her shoulders? There were days when the doubts crept in, when she felt like she was walking a tightrope, trying to keep the restaurant running smoothly while also being the best mom to Mia. One evening, after a particularly tough shift, Sarah sat in her small apartment, looking at the pile of paperwork and reports that had been accumulating on the kitchen table. She rubbed her eyes, feeling the exhaustion of the day catch up with her. It had been a hectic night at the restaurant. Customers were demanding. The kitchen had a backlog of orders, and tempers had flared a few times among the staff. Sarah had handled it all, keeping her calm and her focus, but now, as she sat alone in the quiet of her apartment, it felt like all of it was weighing on her. Mia had already gone to bed, and the house was still except for the sound of Sarah's thoughts. She reflected on the progress she had made in the last few months. The restaurant had seen a noticeable improvement in morale and efficiency, thanks to her leadership. The team was more united, the customers were happier, and she had created a more positive atmosphere for everyone involved. She had found ways to balance the schedules, listen to her team's concerns, and create a work environment where people didn't just work for a paycheck, but worked because they felt valued. Yet, despite all the changes, she still had moments when she questioned her own abilities. Was she truly making a difference, or was she just getting lucky? The phone buzzed on the counter, snapping Sarah out of her thoughts. She picked it up and saw a message from James. "Hi Sarah, I wanted to check in. How are you holding up? I know it's not easy, but I'm really proud of the progress you've made." Sarah smiled at the message. It had been a while since she'd spoken to James directly. After the initial meeting where he had offered her the promotion, they hadn't had much time to connect. Still, his support meant more to her than he probably realized. She quickly typed a response. "Thank you, James. It's been tough, but I think I'm finally starting to get the hang of it. Some days are harder than others, but I feel like I'm making a difference." She stared at the screen for a moment, hesitating. It wasn't easy for Sarah to admit when things were difficult, but she felt an odd sense of relief in telling the truth. She didn't have to pretend everything was perfect. Almost immediately, James replied, "That's exactly how it is. Leadership is never easy, but you're doing great. Just remember, you don't have to do it all alone. Lean on your team when you need to, and don't forget to take care of yourself too. You've earned it." Sarah put down the phone and took a deep breath. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to feel proud of the work she had done. James's words echoed in her mind. Lean on your team. She realized that, even though she had come so far, she hadn't always trusted her team to help her when things got tough. She had tried to carry everything herself, afraid to ask for help. But now, she understood that leadership wasn't about doing everything on your own. It was about creating a sense of community, about allowing others to support you just as much as you supported them. The next day at the restaurant, Sarah made a decision. It was time to show her team that they were truly in this together. She called a staff meeting in the break room before the lunch rush. As everyone gathered around, Sarah stood in front of them, her heart racing a little. She had something important to say. "I just wanted to take a moment to thank all of you," Sarah began, her voice steady but warm. "This restaurant has been through a lot lately, and I know it's not always easy, but we've come a long way together. We've built something here, a team, a family. And I want you all to know that I am proud of the work we're doing. But more than that, I want to make sure we're all taking care of ourselves. I know I've been pushing myself hard lately, but I'm learning that I don't have to do it all alone. I want you to feel like you can lean on me when you need to, just like I'm leaning on you." There was a moment of silence as Sarah's words sank in. Then, one by one, the team began nodding and murmuring their agreement. Mark, the waiter who had spoken to her earlier, was the first to speak up. "Thanks, Sarah," he said, his voice sincere. "That means a lot. We've got your back, just like you've got ours." The others chimed in, offering their support. Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest as she realized how much her team had come to care for her, and how much she had come to care for them. This wasn't just a job for any of them. It was a place where they all shared in each other's successes and challenges. As the lunch rush began, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose. The restaurant wasn't just a business to her. It was a community, and she was part of something bigger than herself. In that moment, Sarah understood the true lesson of her journey. Leadership wasn't about power or control. It was about building trust, fostering collaboration, and being willing to grow alongside others. That night, after work, Sarah walked home with Mia, her little hand holding hers tightly. They stopped at the park, as they always did. The sun was setting, casting a soft glow over the playground. Sarah watched as Mia ran toward the swings, her laughter echoing in the air. Sarah smiled, feeling the weight of everything she had learned. Life wasn't perfect. There would still be challenges ahead, and there would be days when things didn't go as planned. But Sarah had learned that it wasn't about never falling. It was about getting back up, about learning from the hard times, and about sharing the journey with the people who cared about you. And as Sarah watched Mia swing higher and higher into the sky, she knew that she had found something even more important than success in her career. She had found peace. And for the first time in a long time, she felt truly at home in her own life.